My name is Rowan Hale, and last summer my family erased me. Not by accident, not by misunderstanding, by choice. They held our annual reunion at Silver Pine Lodge, the same cedar-scented cabin where I'd spent every July since childhood, and they did it without me. I found out through a photo, 13 smiling faces, a blueberry pie on the porch rail, and my grandmother's caption, "Another perfect summer together." I stared at that picture until my phone dimmed, wondering which part of me they'd cropped out first, the architect, the unmarried woman, or simply the one who stopped apologizing. 3 months later, the knock came. I remember, because the rain had just started soft and steady against the maple leaves. When I opened the door, they were all there. Grandmother Evelyn, my 2 aunts, and the cousins who'd once shared bunk beds with me. They looked smaller, somehow, framed by the gray Seattle light, yet they smiled like it was Christmas morning. Rowan Evelyn said, her voice syrupy warm, "What a lovely home you have. We thought it was time we saw where you've settled." For a heartbeat, I almost believed her. Then I saw the folder in her hand, the kind she used whenever there was family business. And in that moment, I understood they hadn't come to apologize. They'd come because they needed something I had built on my own. The smell of wet earth drifted in from the garden I'd planted myself. Behind them, the street shimmered with rain. I should have shut the door, but curiosity, or maybe that old hunger for belonging, kept me still. I stepped aside and said, "Come in," and that's where the reckoning began. When I think about where everything began, it's always the summers at Silver Pine Lodge that surface first. The lake shimmered like glass at dawn, and my grandfather's fishing rod leaned against the porch rail waiting for me before anyone else woke up. He was the only one who ever let me be quiet without asking what was wrong. The rest of the family filled the house with noise, laughter, gossip, rules disguised as advice. Back then I thought noise meant love. Grandmother Evelyn ran the household with the precision of a courtroom clerk. Every breakfast plate had to match every towel folded into thirds. She'd correct you without raising her voice, which somehow made it worse. A woman's grace, she'd say, is in the way she keeps things in order. I learned early that her version of order never included people who asked why. I asked why all the time. Why the lake house needed to look exactly the same every year. Why my aunts Marla and Denise measured worth in husbands and holiday tables. Why being a good girl meant never wanting more than what was offered. When I was 9, I found an old drafting ruler in my grandfather's shed and started sketching a bridge across the narrowest part of the lake. I spent the rest of the week drawing lines that connected what the family kept apart. My cousins laughed, called it Rowan's imaginary project. Evelyn just smiled, that thin, brittle smile of hers. "Sweetheart," she told me, "a woman builds a home with her heart, not with blueprints." That sentence lodged in me like splintered wood. By high school, I'd filled 6 sketchbooks and started mailing applications to architecture programs without telling her. The day my acceptance letter came, she hosted Sunday lunch. Everyone was there, even my father, who usually stayed quiet to keep the peace. When I told them I'd chosen design school in Seattle, the room froze. Marla dropped her fork. Evelyn didn't blink. She simply said, "You'll come home when you've outgrown that phase." But I didn't outgrow it. I grew because of it. Still, every July I returned to Silver Pine. I told myself it mattered to show I could honor the past without surrendering to it. I'd bring my sketchbook, sit by the dock after everyone went to bed, and trace reflections of the cabin lights on the water. Sometimes I wondered what it would take to build something no one could take credit for but me. The older I got, the more those reunions felt like dress rehearsals for roles I no longer fit into. The same questions always came. When are you settling down? Doesn't that job tire you out? You must get lonely in the city. They said it like kindness, but it landed like judgment. Grandmother never missed her chance to remind me that the family's strength came from togetherness. Yet somehow that togetherness always meant doing things her way. Even then, I didn't realize the day would come when she'd weaponize it, turn family into currency, belonging into leverage. At 17, watching the lake ripple under the last light, I promised myself one thing. I'd build a life as solid and deliberate as the bridges I sketched, something that could stand even if they all decided to walk away. I just didn't know how literal that promise would become. Seattle never felt like escape. It felt like permission. The city glowed in rainlight that first night, and my tiny Ballard studio smelled of coffee and salt. At Harbor and Lumen, I started as an intern unnoticed until my sketches began appearing on the idea board. "Keep watching her," a partner wrote. It was the first time anyone encouraged my hunger to build. The work was brutal, but mine. Deadlines bled into dawns, yet for once my worth had weight steel beams, sunlight balance, When I was chosen for a 6-month project in Copenhagen, it meant missing the Silver Pine reunion. Evelyn's voice on the phone was cool. So skyscrapers matter more than your roots now. I wanted to explain it wasn't rebellion, but alignment, but she'd already decided what mattered. Copenhagen changed me. I learned how buildings could breathe, how light could be shaped. Our design made it into Architectural Digest Nordics. On the flight home, my supervisor said, "You built something that won't disappear when the lights go out." Back in Seattle, I poured myself into a small craftsman house. Simple, sunlit, my own. When Evelyn had a mild stroke, I returned home, helped her recover, then left again without thanks. I told myself love wasn't symmetrical. Months later, peace settled until a photo shattered it. My family, all 13 of them at Silver Pine glasses raised. My name nowhere. Calls unanswered, messages ignored. Evelyn's Facebook post read, "Family is everything. Grateful for those who make time for what matters most." Something in me cracked. I spent the next day in the garden tearing weeds, planting wildflowers, until anger turned to clarity. If they could erase me from their tradition, I'd create my own. I rebuilt my home solar panels' oak shelves light, reclaiming every corner. The silence lasted until one gray October morning. A silver SUV stopped in my drive. Evelyn stepped out, folder in hand, flanked by Marla Denise and the cousins from that photograph. "Rowan, darling," she said smoothly. "What a lovely home you've made. We thought it was time to visit." Rain began to fall. I could have walked away, but I didn't. Some part of me, small, stubborn, unfinished, still wanted to know why they'd come. Rain slicked the porch in silver when they arrived, 4 ghosts framed by a life I'd already buried. My hands were still dirty from the garden. "Come in," I said, though the words felt strange. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and coffee. They moved like inspectors, Marla tracing countertops, Denise murmuring approval, Evelyn smiling that painted, judging smile. "You've done well for yourself, Rowan." "Truly," she said, praise wrapped in thorns. I made tea, and when I returned, they sat like a tribunal. Evelyn rested a manila folder on her lap. "There's been a development," she began. "The Silver Pine Lodge taxes upkeep." "You're selling it," I said. She nodded smoothly. "We prefer to think of it as passing the torch." The rain filled the silence. The lodge had been the one place I tried to belong, and now they were discarding it. "So why tell me now?" I asked. Marla cleared her throat. "Family traditions matter. We still need a gathering place." I felt the trap form. "You want to hold the reunions here?" Denise smiled tightly. "It's practical, close to the airport." Evelyn added, "This home could bring us together again. Poetic, isn't it?" Poetic, her word for manipulation dressed as grace. "You excluded me without a word," I said. "Now you want to use my house." "Let's not dwell on misunderstandings," she said. I laughed. "You mean decisions? You've been busy," she replied smoothly. "We thought we were respecting your priorities, the old rhythm of guilt and control, only now I recognized the pattern." "You decided I didn't belong." She didn't deny it. "Sometimes we make choices for the greater good." "The greater good," I echoed. "Did that include lying to me?" Silence. Finally, she opened the folder property listing sale notices. My address circled in red. "You have the space," she said. And truthfully, the means. There it was. Not apology transaction. "I'll think about it," I said. They mistook calm for compliance, but as they settled back into comfort, I understood perfectly. This wasn't about preserving legacy. It was about dismantling the structure that kept me small. And for once, the architect in me knew exactly what needed to be demolished. The rain never stopped that night. It drummed on the skylight while the women who once ruled my life sat beneath my roof sipping tea from my cups. From the kitchen, I heard their whispers, strategy disguised as small talk. I was a problem to be managed. When I entered the room, silence fell. Evelyn adjusted her scarf, claiming control. "Rowan," she began smoothly. "There were misunderstandings about the reunion. What matters is moving forward. We're family." "Then start with the truth," I said. She hesitated. "Perhaps we misjudged. But unity." "You mean access," I cut in, "to this house, this life, now that it matters." Aunt Marla sighed. "We didn't come to fight. We just want the family together again." "Help you fix what you broke?" I asked. Denise reached for me. "We just want things to feel right." Then here's how I said. "Acknowledge what happened. You excluded me. Stop calling it tradition, and if you want a reunion, rent a space. This isn't your hall and I'm not your solution. Evelyn's voice sharpened. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being clear. Silence thickened. Finally, I added, and you owe me an apology. Not for selling the lodge, but for pretending love means obedience, Piper whispered. She's right. The spell cracked. Even Denise looked down. Evelyn's power dimmed, brittle and old. I gathered the cups. You can rest in the guest room. We'll talk in the morning. Evelyn stood. We've wasted our time. Not wasted, I said. Just different now. Her tone softened. Family is forgiveness. Forgiveness needs truth first. That night I lay awake as the rain eased. For once I wasn't rehearsing how to earn love, only how to keep peace without losing myself. By morning I understood forgiveness wasn't surrender, and boundaries could be the most elegant revenge. By morning the house was quiet. The storm had passed, the air sharp with renewal. I brewed coffee and found the living room spotless. The teacups rinsed, the folder gone, only Evelyn's perfume lingering like a closing argument. Watching their car disappear down the road, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt clean. That afternoon, Sloane arrived. You didn't bury anyone, did you? Not physically, I said, but something got laid to rest. We sat on the porch, sunlight warm on our legs. I told her everything, the visit, the boundaries, the silence that followed. What now? She asked. Not a fortress, I said. Something better. A community. Weeks later, I gathered the people who had stayed friends, co-workers, neighbors. No legacy, no expectations. Just shared dishes, laughter and music drifting through open windows. We called it Chosen Family Day jokingly at first, but as night fell it felt real, belonging earned, not inherited. In the garden the tulips were pushing through rain-soaked soil. I remembered my grandfather's words. Strong structures breathe, weak ones just stand there waiting to fall. He hadn't meant houses. A few days later Marcus Reed emailed, heard about your Copenhagen feature. I also heard what your grandmother told me back then. I'm sorry I listened. I replied simply, thank you. We're both learning what strength looks like. When Silver Pine Lodge sold, Evelyn sent one final message. Perhaps one day we can start again. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the blueprints for my next project, a retreat by the water built for peace, not approval. I named its garden the Grant Hale Grove, after the one person who made silence feel safe. When construction finished, sunlight spilled through the high windows, blessing the wood. That was my quiet revenge, a life built with intention walls that kept peace in and guilt out. When asked why I'd named it Chosen Ground, I smiled. Because this time I said I decided who gets to stand here. Dusk settles differently these days. The light doesn't press in. It rests. From the porch I can see the string lights I hung across the garden sway gently in the wind, casting small halos on the grass. Inside, laughter drifts from the kitchen. Friends rinsing dishes, arguing playfully over who gets the last slice of pie. No one here is bound by obligation. They stay because they want to. I sit on the steps with a mug of tea, the wood still warm beneath my palms. For years I built things to prove I belonged to family, to tradition, to the idea that love meant endurance. Now I build because it steadies me. Every wall in this house, every beam and window is a promise I made to myself that I will never again confuse proximity with affection. Sometimes I wonder if Evelyn ever understood what she created the day she closed that door on me. She thought she was teaching me humility. What she taught me instead was independence, the kind that doesn't shout but endures. I haven't blocked her number. I haven't burned bridges. I've simply stopped handing her the matches. People talk about revenge like it's a strike, quick, loud, final. But mine was quieter. It was continuing, thriving, finding joy without permission. It was standing in a room I built myself and realizing I no longer needed their approval to breathe. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of lavender from the garden. I take a slow breath and think of my grandfather's words. Strong structures breathe. This one does, and as the laughter inside rises again, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves, I realize peace isn't a gift anyone can give. It's something you design brick by brick, choice by choice, until one day it stands on its own.